A black woman driving a $70,000 Mercedes at midnight. Stolen vehicle. Has to be. The words hang in the cold November air, spoken with the casual certainty of a man who has already written the ending to a story he just started. Blue and red lights paint the darkness in alternating strokes, illuminating the shoulder of Interstate 285, where a silver Mercedes coupe sits motionless, its engine still warm, its driver still inside. The officer approaches from the driver's side, flashlight beam cutting through the tinted window like an accusation. His nameplate reads, Calloway. 14 years on the force. 47 traffic stops in the past 18 months. 31 of them luxury vehicles. 23 of those drivers were black. 0 convictions resulted. But those numbers exist only in a database he has never bothered to check, because checking would require the kind of self-reflection that interferes with instinct. And Marcus Calloway trusts his instincts. Inside the Mercedes, a woman sits perfectly still. Both hands rest on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, fingers spread wide where they can be seen. She does not reach for her purse, does not fumble for her registration, does not make any sudden movements that could be misinterpreted, or correctly interpreted, or interpreted at all in a way that ends with her bleeding on asphalt. Her name is Veronica Ashford. She is 44 years old. She lives in Buckhead, in a house she purchased with money she earned, driving a car she leases with credit she built over 2 decades of meticulous financial decisions. None of these facts will matter for the next 7 hours. The flashlight beam hits her face directly, and she does not flinch, does not shield her eyes, does not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. License and registration. Not a request. A command. The tone of a man who has never been told no by someone who looked like her. She moves slowly, deliberately, narrating each action before she takes it. I'm reaching into my purse for my wallet. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to open it now. The glove compartment light illuminates a leather folder containing her registration, insurance card, and a business card she placed there 6 months ago and has not thought about since. She hands over the documents with the same measured precision, and the dispatch log begins its official record of what will become the longest night of Marcus Calloway's career. The log will later read, Unit 41, 11:47 p.m., traffic stop, Interstate 285 mile marker 22, black female, late model Mercedes, Georgia plate, Foxtrot, Kilo 7742. Reason for stop, suspicious vehicle matching theft profile. Suspicious. The word carries weight it should not, legal authority it does not deserve, power it wields regardless. Calloway does not read the registration she handed him, does not look at the name, does not verify the address or the vehicle identification number or any of the details that would tell him in seconds that this car belongs to this woman and has never been reported stolen by anyone, anywhere, ever. Instead, he folds the documents without examining them and slides them into his back pocket like a receipt he will deal with later. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Hands where I can see them. Behind them, a second patrol car has arrived. No sirens, just lights. The quiet arrival of backup that was never called for, because backup was always coming. Sergeant Elena Voss steps out, 22 years on the force, the kind of experience that should mean wisdom, but sometimes means only a more sophisticated method of looking away. Veronica reaches for the door handle, then pauses. Her keys sit in the ignition. She removes them, holds them visible, and places them on the roof of the car before stepping out. It is such a small gesture, so automatic, so practiced, that Calloway does not even register its significance. But the habit exists for a reason. People who expect to be searched learn where to put their belongings. People who expect to be accused learn how to remove excuses. People who expect to be disbelieved learn to document everything, starting with the position of their own keys. The November air cuts through her blazer as she stands on the shoulder, gravel crunching under heels that were not designed for highway shoulders at nearly midnight. Calloway positions her facing the car, palms flat on the roof, the pose of submission he requires before he will even begin the conversation. This your vehicle? Yes. Where'd you get it? The question is designed to provoke, to elicit defensiveness, to create the narrative of a woman who cannot explain her own possessions, whose answers do not satisfy, whose very existence in this car on this highway at this hour is evidence of something that requires investigation. I lease it, from Mercedes-Benz of Buckhead, the dealership on Peachtree Road. Calloway makes a sound that is not quite a laugh, more like a release of air that carries contempt with it. Nice neighborhood, expensive cars, midnight drive. Where are you coming from? A professional consultation, downtown. What kind of consultation happens at midnight? The kind that runs late. He circles her slowly, flashlight playing over her clothes, her shoes, the interior of her car visible through the open door. Sergeant Voss approaches now, her boots crunching on the gravel with the steady rhythm of someone who has walked this walk many times before. You sure about this one? Voss asks, voice low, meant for Calloway alone. But Veronica hears it. On a quiet highway at midnight, sound carries further than people expect. Profile fits. Calloway does not lower his voice, does not see the need. Trust me. Voss nods slowly, the kind of nod that signals agreement without requiring thought. Document everything. Make it stick. 4 words. That is all it takes. 4 words spoken by a supervisor to a subordinate, and the direction is set. Not investigate. Not verify. Make it stick. The language of outcome-based policing, where the conclusion precedes the evidence, where the arrest justifies the stop, where the system protects itself by never admitting it made a mistake. Veronica files the exchange away, notes the time, notes the phrasing, notes the dynamic between them, the ease with which Voss enables and Calloway executes. This is not improvisation. This is choreography. These two have danced this dance before. A 3rd patrol car arrives, parking 20 feet back. Officer Owen Price steps out, 26 years old, 8 months out of the academy, still new enough to feel the weight of the badge and uncertain what to do with it. His dashcam is running, has been running since he pulled up 3 minutes ago. He does not announce this, does not draw attention to it, simply stands beside his vehicle with his hand resting on his belt, watching, recording, saying nothing. Veronica catches his reflection in her side mirror. Young face, uncertain posture, the body language of a man who knows something is wrong but has not yet decided what, if anything, he is willing to do about it. She has seen that look before. In courtrooms, in depositions, in the faces of witnesses who had information and chose silence, who watched injustice and calculated the cost of speaking. "May I contact my husband?" she asks, her voice carrying the measured calm of someone who understands that tone matters more than words in moments like this. "He is an attorney. He will want to know where I am." Calloway's response comes quick, dismissive, rehearsed. "You'll get your phone call at the station, same as everyone else." Same as everyone else. The phrase is meant to equalize, to suggest that she receives no special treatment, that the system treats all people identically regardless of circumstance. It is a lie so familiar it has become invisible to the man telling it. He returns to his patrol car, slides into the driver's seat, and enters her information into the computer. License number, registration, vehicle identification number. The system processes the query in seconds, and the radio crackles to life with a response that should change everything. "Unit 41, this is dispatch." The dispatcher's voice is neutral, professional, utterly disinterested in the drama unfolding on Interstate 285. "Vehicle Georgia registration Foxtrot Kilo 7742 comes back valid to owner Veronica Ashford. Buckhead address, clean record, no warrants, no stolen vehicle report on file. You are clear to proceed." Clear to proceed. In police terminology, this means the stop has reached its natural conclusion. The vehicle is not stolen. The driver has no warrants. There is no legal basis for continued detention. Clear to proceed means let her go. Calloway stares at the screen. The information does not match what he expected, does not confirm what he was certain he would find. For a moment, something flickers across his face. Not doubt, exactly, but the discomfort of a man whose instincts have been contradicted by facts. Voss appears at his window, leaning down. What did it come back? Clean. The word comes out flat, reluctant. But something is still off. The profile fits. The car, the time, He does not finish the sentence. Does not need to. Voss nods, and her nod carries the weight of 22 years of experience doing exactly what she is about to authorize. Trust your instincts. If it feels wrong, document it. Process her. We'll sort it out at the station. In the back of Calloway's patrol car, separated from the front by a plastic partition designed to protect officers from suspects, Veronica sits with her hands cuffed behind her back. The plastic seat is cold through her blazer. The position is uncomfortable by design, and she heard the entire radio exchange through the vehicle's speakers, every word crystal clear. They know the car is not stolen. Dispatch confirmed it. The registration is valid, her record is clean, and they are continuing anyway. Her jaw tightens. Not from fear, that passed 20 minutes ago, replaced by something colder, more patient, more strategic. She is not afraid anymore. She is calculating, thinking 3 moves ahead. Every lawyer instinct she possesses is now fully active, cataloging violations, anticipating arguments, building a case that exists only in her mind but will soon exist in documentation that cannot be ignored. She closes her eyes. Not to sleep, to think, to prepare for the real battle, the one that comes in the morning. Calloway exits his vehicle and walks to her Mercedes with his flashlight, opening the passenger door for an inventory search. The legal justification for this is thin at best. Courts have ruled on the boundaries of vehicle searches during traffic stops, and those boundaries do not include what he is about to do. But boundaries require someone to enforce them, and tonight, on this stretch of highway, enforcement is whatever Marcus Calloway decides it is. Her briefcase sits on the passenger seat. Leather, expensive. Embossed initials on the front, VA. He opens it, finding court documents, case files, business cards with her name, letterhead that carries a seal he does not bother to examine closely. Everything official. Everything real. He flips through the papers quickly, his eyes scanning for something. Drugs, cash, weapons, evidence of the crime he has already decided she committed. On one file tab, a case number catches his attention. State Vere Calloway. His brain registers the name but does not process its significance. Calloway is a common name, could be anyone. His ego will not allow him to see what is right in front of him, the coincidence that is not a coincidence, the connection that will destroy him. Voss walks up to the passenger window as he holds one of Veronica's business cards between 2 fingers. She has got fake judge credentials, professional job, good quality. Voss examines the card, feeling the paper between her fingers, reading the embossed seal, the federal eagle, the weight of authenticity that should give her pause. It does not. Book her for false impersonation 2, public official impersonation, Georgia Code Section 16 to 10 to 23. That is a felony. Through the partition, Veronica's voice carries the controlled fury of a woman who has spent her entire career mastering the art of remaining calm when calm is the last thing she feels. Officer Calloway, I strongly advise you to verify my identity through the courthouse before you proceed further. This will not end the way you think it will. Calloway slams the briefcase shut, returns to the driver's seat, and starts the engine. They all try this, he says to Voss through the open window. High-end car, fake credentials, probably has a lawyer boyfriend feeding her lines. Voss nods. Just make sure your report is airtight. Behind them, Owen Price shifts his weight from foot to foot, clears his throat once, a nervous sound that no one acknowledges. His dashcam continues recording. Every word, every movement, every violation that will later be time-stamped, catalogued, and entered into evidence in a proceeding none of them can yet imagine. The convoy forms. 3 patrol cars, lights flashing, no sirens, heading toward the precinct with a woman who told them exactly who she was and was not believed. The 15-minute drive passes in silence. Veronica does not speak, does not demand her rights, does not threaten lawsuits. She is playing a longer game than that. Some battles are won by fighting. Others are won by waiting. The precinct's sally port receives them with institutional indifference. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, the smell of disinfectant and old coffee that every police station shares regardless of jurisdiction. Lieutenant Raymond Fitch sits at the booking desk, 53 years old, watch commander for the night shift, processing paperwork with the mechanical efficiency of a man who stopped reading what he signed years ago. "You ran her info through the system?" Fitch asks, the question automatic, asked by rote. "Clean record," Calloway confirms. But the vehicle profile fits the pattern we have been seeing. Luxury car, late night, nervous behavior. The description is fabricated. Veronica displayed no nervous behavior. Her compliance was absolute, her demeanor controlled, her responses measured. But nervous behavior is the kind of phrase that justifies anything, explains everything, and appears in reports so frequently that no one questions its accuracy anymore. Fitch signs the booking form without reading it, does not review the details, does not ask follow-up questions, does not exercise any of the supervisory oversight his position requires. He simply signs and slides the form back across the desk. Book her. Process. Let day shift sort it out. One signature. That is all. One signature from a man who could have stopped this, who could have asked questions, who could have demanded verification of the claims being made. Instead, he signs his name and returns to his coffee, because signing is easier than thinking, and thinking is harder than not caring. Veronica is fingerprinted, photographed. Her personal property is cataloged with bureaucratic precision that will later prove her undoing and his. The property receipt reads, Item 1, leather briefcase, black. Item 2, cellular phone, iPhone model. Item 3, business cards, quantity 12. Item 4, court documents, sealed envelope, case reference redacted. The sealed envelope is not opened. The officer processing her property notes its existence, records its presence, and places it in an evidence bag without examining its contents. Later, when the contents of that envelope become relevant, the fact that it remained sealed will matter. The chain of custody will matter. Every procedural detail that seems meaningless now will matter. They lead her to a holding cell at 2:23 a.m. The fluorescent light flickers with the irregular rhythm of neglected maintenance. The smell of industrial cleaner mixes with something older, danker, the accumulated residue of everyone who has sat on this metal bench before her. The door closes with a sound that is designed to feel final. Veronica sits, spine straight, eyes open, not sleeping, thinking. Outside the cell, the night shift continues its routines. Reports are filed. Coffee is consumed. Jokes are made about the woman who claimed to be a judge, the elaborate story she told, the credentials she somehow faked with such convincing quality. No one checks. No one calls the courthouse. No one does the 30 seconds of work that would reveal the catastrophic mistake they have made. And the clock continues its indifferent count toward morning. If this story is already making your blood pressure rise, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what happens next will make that traffic stop look like a warm-up. The holding cell has no windows. Time passes in fluorescent increments, measured only by the changing faces of officers who walk past without looking in, the distant sound of phones ringing at the front desk, the occasional shuffle of other detainees being processed through the system's mechanical routine. Veronica does not ask for updates, does not demand to know when she will be released, does not make the kinds of requests that would mark her as difficult, combative, deserving of whatever delays the system chooses to impose. She has been in enough courtrooms to know that silence is sometimes the most powerful argument. At 6:15 a.m., they allow her one phone call. She dials a number from memory, not her husband, not a lawyer, not anyone whose identity would telegraph her own. The phone rings twice before a voice answers, groggy with sleep and immediately alert. "This better be important. I need you to contact my office. Tell them I will be delayed. Use the protocol." A pause. The sound of someone sitting up in bed, processing words that carry more weight than their surface meaning suggests. "Protocol. Understood. How long?" "Unknown. Handle it." She hangs up without explanation, without context, without the kind of details that most people would provide when calling from a jail cell at 6 a.m. The brevity is intentional. The word protocol is significant. Whoever answered that call understood exactly what it meant, and that understanding required no elaboration. The day shift arrives at 7 a.m., fresh faces replacing tired ones, the bureaucratic transfer of responsibility that happens every morning in every precinct in the country. Detective Carol Tate receives the overnight files, a stack of paperwork representing the various encounters between law enforcement and civilians that occurred while most of the city slept. She reads through them quickly, processing the familiar categories: domestic disturbance, DUI, petty theft, trespassing. Then she reaches the file for Veronica Ashford and stops. The name is familiar. Not personally familiar. She does not know a Veronica Ashford, but familiar in the way that certain names carry weight in professional circles. She reads the arrest report twice, notes the charges: suspicion of operating a stolen vehicle, false impersonation of a public official, notes the arresting officer's narrative about profile matching and instinctive suspicion, notes the dispatch confirmation that came back clean before the arrest proceeded anyway. Something is wrong here. She can feel it in the way the report contradicts itself, in the gap between what dispatch confirmed and what Calloway documented, in the phrase false impersonation, applied to someone whose business card sits photographed in the evidence file with the kind of quality that does not come from a print shop in a strip mall. She calls dispatch first. "This is Detective Tate, day shift. I need verification on a traffic stop from last night. Unit 41, 11:47 p.m., Interstate 285. The dispatcher pulls the record. "What do you need?" "Confirm the vehicle status check results. Vehicle Georgia registration, Foxtrot Kilo 7742. Query returned valid registration to owner Veronica Ashford. Clean record, no warrants, no stolen vehicle report. Clear to proceed." "Clear to proceed," Tate repeats. "And the arrest was processed anyway." "I do not have visibility into what happens after dispatch, Detective. Just the query results." Tate thanks her and hangs up. Then she calls the number on Veronica Ashford's business card, the one photographed and marked as evidence of fraudulent credentials. The phone rings 3 times before a recorded message begins. "You have reached the chambers of Judge Veronica Ashford, United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia. Office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. If this is an urgent matter." Tate hangs up before the message finishes. Her hand trembles slightly as she sets the phone down. She knows that voice, not personally, but professionally. Every attorney who practices in federal court in Atlanta knows that voice, or at least knows of it. Judge Ashford has a reputation for meticulous procedure, for demanding excellence from every attorney who appears before her, for running a courtroom where preparation is not optional and excuses are not accepted. And her officers arrested her last night for driving her own car. Tate finds Calloway in the break room, pouring coffee with the relaxed confidence of a man who believes his night shift went exactly as it should have. "The woman from last night, the Mercedes." Calloway barely looks up. "What about her?" "Walk me through the stop." "Profile fit, luxury vehicle, late night, black female driver." He says it like a checklist, like the combination of those factors constitutes evidence rather than prejudice. "I have done this 100 times. You develop a sense for it." "And when dispatch confirmed the vehicle was not stolen?" "Instinct." He finally meets her eyes, his confidence unshaken. 20 years of instinct. The dispatch system does not catch everything. Paperwork can be faked. "You know how these things work." "What I know," Tate says carefully, "is that dispatch confirmed the vehicle was clean before you transported her. And I documented my reasons for proceeding. The arrest report is thorough. This one is solid, detective. Trust me. Trust me. The same words he used with Voss on the highway. The phrase that substitutes for evidence, that replaces verification, that allows the system to perpetuate its own mistakes under the cover of experience and instinct. Tate does not trust him, but she also does not yet know the full scope of what she is dealing with. She needs more information before she escalates, before she takes this up the chain to people who will ask questions she cannot yet answer. The briefcase sits in the evidence room, cataloged and tagged and waiting for someone to look at its contents with attention rather than assumption. Tate signs the chain of custody form and carries it to an examination table, where she opens it under the bright lights that transform evidence into story. The letterhead stops her cold. Not a law firm, not a private practice. United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia. The seal is federal, the eagle crisp and official, the weight of the paper exactly what government documents feel like when they are real. She flips through the case files, reading titles and case numbers, recognizing the format from 100 depositions and discovery requests. On one folder, a label, case number 124 CV 03892, under seal. She does not open the sealed folder. Chain of custody requires her to document what she observes without tampering, and opening a sealed federal document would constitute tampering of the highest order. But the existence of that folder, its presence in this briefcase, its federal case number and under seal designation, these are not things that get faked. These are not things that belong to someone pretending to be a judge. Her hands are shaking when she picks up the phone and calls Captain Joanna Merrick. Merrick arrives in the evidence room 12 minutes later, her uniform pressed, her expression neutral, her political instincts already calculating the damage control that this situation will require. She is 49 years old, precinct commander for 6 years, a career built on managing problems before they become crises and managing crises before they become careers ended. She reads the documents, examines the business cards, stares at the federal seal for a long moment while Tate waits for instructions. Where is she now? Still in holding, 7 hours. Merrick's jaw tightens. 7 hours. A federal judge has been sitting in their holding cell for 7 hours because one of her officers decided that a black woman could not possibly own a Mercedes. Get her out, now, quietly. Ma'am, there is a process. I said quietly. No paperwork trail if we can help it. Tate's response is immediate, firm, the refusal of a detective who understands that what her captain is suggesting will make everything worse. That is not how this works, Captain. There is already a booking record, a property receipt, dashcam footage from 3 units. We cannot make this disappear. Merrick's expression flickers. Frustration, fear, the recognition that she is not dealing with a situation that can be managed through the usual channels. She is dealing with a mistake that has been documented at every stage, witnessed by multiple officers, recorded on multiple cameras, and inflicted on someone with the power to ensure that consequences follow. Release her, return her property, and get me Calloway's complete file. Every traffic stop for the past 2 years. Veronica walks out of the holding cell at 7:42 a.m., escorted by a uniformed officer who cannot meet her eyes. No one apologizes. No one explains the delay. No one offers the kind of acknowledgement that might, in a different circumstance, begin the process of making something right. She accepts her property in silence. Signs for the briefcase, the phone, the business cards, the sealed envelope that was never opened. Then she speaks, and her voice carries the precision of someone who has spent decades crafting arguments that leave no room for interpretation. I will need copies of all documentation, incident report, booking record, property receipt, and dashcam footage from all units on scene. A FOIA request will follow, but I am making this request formally now in person, so that there is no ambiguity about what I am asking for and when I asked for it. The officer processing her release writes down the request, his handwriting uncertain, his eyes flicking toward the captain's office where Merrick stands watching through the glass. Tate observes from across the room, noting not what Veronica demanded, but what she did not. She did not threaten to sue, did not invoke her position, did not name drop or power play, or do any of the things that people with authority typically do when that authority has been violated. She asked for documentation. Specific documentation. The exact documentation that would be needed if someone wanted to build a case rather than simply vent frustration. She did not ask for a lawyer, Tate murmurs to a colleague. She asked for documentation. The distinction is significant. Lawyers negotiate. Documentation proves. And whatever Veronica Ashford is planning to do with that proof, she is clearly thinking several moves ahead of everyone else in this building. Outside the precinct, the morning sun cuts through Atlanta's perpetual haze with indifferent warmth. Veronica stands on the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, waiting for the car she called during her one phone call to arrive. Her blazer is wrinkled. Her hair is not as perfect as it was 14 hours ago. She looks like a woman who spent the night in a holding cell, because she is, and she does not try to hide it. The car that arrives is not her Mercedes. That will need to be retrieved from the impound lot where it was towed after her arrest. This is a black sedan, government plates, driven by someone whose face Veronica recognizes but does not greet. She gets in, closes the door, and the car pulls away from the precinct without a word spoken. She does not go home, does not go to her chambers, does not do any of the things a person might do after 14 hours of unlawful detention. She goes to internal affairs. The complaint she files is not handwritten, not emotional, not the kind of document that IA officers receive from angry civilians who feel wronged and want someone to listen. It is typed, formatted, structured like a legal brief, citing specific statutes and specific violations with specific timestamps that correspond to the dashcam footage she knows exists. The complaint reads, in part, complainant alleges violations of Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable seizure, Georgia Code Section 16-10-23, regarding false imprisonment by law enforcement, and potential violations of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. The arresting officer proceeded with detention and arrest after receiving dispatch confirmation that the vehicle was not stolen, constituting continuation of a seizure without probable cause. Complainant further alleges a pattern of racially motivated traffic enforcement requiring investigation under department policy and federal civil rights law. The IA officer who receives the complaint reads it twice. His eyes widen at the legal precision, the statutory citations, the clinical accuracy of the language. Most complaints are messy, emotional, sometimes profane, full of accusations that cannot be proven, and grievances that cannot be addressed. This document is different. This document reads like it was written by someone who knows exactly how the system works and exactly how to make the system work against itself. He does not know yet that he is holding a complaint filed by a federal judge against officers who arrested her for impersonating herself. That revelation will come later, through channels, in meetings that will leave everyone involved deeply uncomfortable. For now, he simply processes the paperwork, assigns a case number, and places it in the queue for investigation. The wheels of accountability begin to turn, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. This story already has more twists than a mountain road, and we are just getting started. If you want to see what happens when the system finally realizes who it arrested, make sure you are subscribed. 2 days pass. Veronica returns to her normal routine, or what passes for normal when your face has been photographed in a booking process, and your fingerprints now exist in a law enforcement database that will retain them indefinitely, regardless of whether charges are ever filed. She presides over cases in her courtroom, reviews briefs, issues rulings, does the work of a federal judge, while the internal affairs investigation she triggered slowly gathers momentum. On the third evening, she is driving home when the lights appear again in her rearview mirror. Blue and red, flashing with the steady rhythm of authority that demands compliance. Her stomach does not drop. She is past that now, but her jaw tightens with the recognition of what this represents. She pulls over. Same protocol as before. Hands on the wheel. Keys removed and placed on the roof. Window down. Waiting. The officer who approaches is not Calloway. This is someone new. Someone different. But the approach is identical. Flashlight in the face. Request for documentation. The theater of suspicion performed for an audience of one. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to step out for a vehicle safety inspection. Your taillight appears to be malfunctioning." Veronica does not argue. Does not point out that her taillights are functioning perfectly, which they are, or that she can see both of them reflected in the patrol car's hood behind her, glowing red with exactly the intensity they were designed to produce. Instead, she responds with precision. That statute, Georgia Code Section 4820, covers equipment violations observed while the vehicle is in motion. My vehicle is currently stationary. You stopped me before any equipment issue could be observed during operation. There is no legal basis for this inspection. The officer, his nameplate reads Scanlon, pauses. His flashlight beam wavers slightly, uncertain. Officers are not accustomed to civilians who cite statute numbers with the easy fluency of someone reading from a legal reference. They are especially not accustomed to this from someone they have already decided to treat as a suspect rather than a citizen. "Ma'am, I am conducting a routine safety check. A routine safety check requires either observed equipment failure during operation, which did not occur, or reasonable articulable suspicion of a specific violation, which you have not stated. If you would like to document your reasons for this stop in your incident report, I will request a copy through official channels. Is there anything else?" Scanlon's face reddens in the flashlight's ambient glow. He is not accustomed to being corrected, not accustomed to encounters where the power dynamic shifts beneath his feet, where the person he stopped knows more about the law he enforces than he does. "Have a safe evening, ma'am." He writes down her license plate number, makes a note on a pad he keeps in his shirt pocket, returns to his patrol car and drives away, leaving her alone on the shoulder of a road she was driving legally, in a car she owns legitimately, having committed no violation that any court would recognize. But she knows what this is. This is not random. This is coordinated. Word has spread about the woman who filed the IA complaint, the one with the fake judge credentials, the one who is causing problems for officers who were just doing their jobs. And now the response is beginning. Not overt enough to be documented, not aggressive enough to generate additional complaints, just persistent enough to send a message. We know who you are, and we can make your life difficult in ways that never appear on any official record. Veronica saves the dashcam footage from her own car, a device she installed 3 years ago after a different traffic stop, one that did not result in arrest, but did result in an understanding that documentation is sometimes the only protection that matters. She notes the time, the location, the officer's nameplate, and adds it to a file she has been building since that night on Interstate 285. The file is growing thicker, and she is patient. At the precinct, in a break room that smells of burned coffee and institutional neglect, Dwight Scanlon meets with 3 other officers and a union representative whose job is to protect members from the consequences of their own actions. The topic of discussion is the problem civilian, who has filed complaints, requested documentation, and is generally making life difficult for everyone involved in that night's traffic stop. She has got connections, Calloway says, his confidence diminished but not eliminated by the captain's earlier interrogation. Someone is feeding her information. The way she cited that statute at Scanlon, that is not normal. That is coached. So, we find out who, Scanlon responds, and we make sure she understands how things work around here. From a corner of the room, Sergeant Voss's voice comes through a phone on speaker. She is not present in person, too risky, too visible, but her guidance shapes the conversation regardless. Be careful. Something about her does not add up. She is too calm, too prepared. I have been doing this for 22 years, and people who are this calm after an arrest are either stupid or dangerous. She is not stupid. The warning hangs in the air, acknowledged but not absorbed. Calloway and Scanlon have already decided what they believe about Veronica Ashford, that she is a fraud, a troublemaker, someone who got lucky and is now pushing her luck too far. They cannot imagine an alternative explanation, cannot conceive that the credentials they dismissed as fake might be real, that the woman they arrested might have authority that exceeds their own by several orders of magnitude. This failure of imagination will cost them everything. Meanwhile, Detective Carol Tate works alone in her office after hours, the building quiet around her, pulling records that no one asked her to pull and finding patterns that no one wants her to find. Calloway's traffic stops for the past 18 months, 47 total. She sorts them by vehicle type. 31 were luxury brands: Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, Tesla. Sorts them by driver demographics. 23 black drivers, 12 of those black women. Sorts them by outcome. 14 arrests, 0 convictions, 0 charges that survived beyond the initial booking process. The numbers tell a story that the individual reports obscure. 1 traffic stop is an encounter. 2 are a coincidence. 14 arrests with 0 convictions is a pattern, and patterns are what civil rights investigations are built on. She digs deeper. The database query returns results that make her sit back in her chair and stare at the screen. Traffic stops by Officer M. Calloway, 18-month period, 47 total. Luxury vehicles, 31. Driver demographics: black male, 12. Black female, 11. Hispanic male, 5. White drivers, 3. Arrests made, 14. Charges filed, 0. Convictions, 0. 0. Not one successful prosecution. Not one case that a district attorney looked at and decided was worth pursuing. Every single arrest Calloway made during this period was either declined for prosecution or dismissed after filing. And yet he continues. And yet his supervisors sign off on his reports. And yet the system treats each individual case as an isolated incident rather than a piece of a larger picture that damns everyone involved. Tate saves the query results, prints a hard copy, adds it to a file that is becoming its own kind of evidence, the documentation of a failure so systematic that it cannot be accidental. She does not know yet how bad this will get, does not know about the expunged complaints, the supervisory negligence, the layers of protection that have allowed Calloway to operate with impunity for years. Those revelations will come later, each one worse than the last, each one making clear that this is not one officer's problem, but an entire institution's pathology. For now, she simply records what she finds and waits for the next piece to fall into place. 2 weeks pass. The internal affairs investigation proceeds with the deliberate pace that all internal investigations share, slow enough to be thorough but also slow enough to test the patience of anyone waiting for accountability. Veronica continues her work in federal court, continues driving her Mercedes, continues documenting every interaction that might become relevant. Detective Tate continues her parallel investigation, the unofficial one, pulling records that connect to other records that connect to patterns that no one in leadership wants to acknowledge. She has a meeting scheduled with Veronica Ashford to provide an update on the complaint, a routine step in the investigation process that will prove to be anything but routine. The address on Veronica's business card leads Tate to a building she recognizes immediately. Not a private office, not a law firm in a downtown high-rise, a federal building. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building, home to the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. She parks, walks through security, provides her identification and the purpose of her visit to a receptionist whose demeanor changes subtly when she mentions Veronica Ashford's name. "Do you have an appointment?" "Detective Carol Tate, Internal Affairs. I am following up on a complaint she filed." The receptionist examines her credentials with attention that exceeds normal protocol, picks up a phone, speaks quietly. Then, "Please wait. Someone will escort you." The escort who arrives wears a uniform Tate recognizes but did not expect. United States Marshal. The badge is unmistakable. The bearing is unmistakable. And the fact that a federal marshal is escorting a local detective to a meeting with a complainant is unmistakable in its implications. They walk through corridors that smell of marble and bureaucracy, past offices where clerks type and attorneys confer, and the machinery of federal justice operates with an efficiency that local courts rarely achieve. The marshal says nothing, offers nothing, simply leads her to a conference room and opens the door. Veronica Ashford enters 5 minutes later. She wears a blazer, professional attire, nothing that would immediately identify her position. But the way the marshal nods to her, not the nod of deference that comes with rank, but the nod of recognition that comes with respect, tells Tate something she is not yet ready to articulate. "Detective, thank you for the update. I appreciate your thoroughness." Tate sets her file on the conference table, suddenly uncertain how to proceed. The investigation she has been conducting now feels incomplete, perhaps deliberately so, perhaps because everyone she has interviewed has been protecting something she does not yet understand. "Ma'am, I have to ask, who exactly do you work for?" Veronica's response comes with a slight smile, the expression of someone who has been waiting for this question since the moment Tate walked into the building. "That will become clear soon enough. For now, focus on the evidence. That is what matters." Tate wants to push, wants to demand clarity, but something in Veronica's tone, in her posture, in the presence of the federal marshal who escorted her here, suggests that the answers she seeks will arrive on their own timeline, not hers. She opens her file instead, presents the findings, explains the statistical analysis, the pattern of arrests without convictions, the discrepancy between dispatch confirmations and documented justifications. Veronica listens without interruption, her expression neutral, her attention complete. When Tate finishes, Veronica nods once. "You have done excellent work, detective. More than I expected. More than most people in your position would have done." "I follow the evidence," Tate says. "The evidence led here." "It did, and it will lead further if you let it." Veronica gathers her papers, signaling that the meeting is concluding. There are expunged complaints in Calloway's file, 3 of them, all removed within the past 2 years, all removed without proper review committee authorization. Start there. Tate did not know about the expunged complaints, had no way of knowing because expunged means erased, removed from records that she can access, hidden behind administrative actions that required supervisory approval. How do you know about? Focus on the evidence, detective. The evidence will tell you everything you need to know. The marshal escorts Tate back to the building entrance. She walks to her car in a daze, her understanding of this case having shifted fundamentally in the past 30 minutes. Whoever Veronica Ashford is, she is not simply a complainant. She is not a victim seeking redress. She is something else entirely, something that operates on a level Tate is only beginning to glimpse. And the expunged complaints are real. Tate finds them that evening, buried in an IT audit trail that most detectives would not know how to access. The department's record system maintains logs of every change, every modification, every deletion, a failsafe designed to prevent evidence tampering that also, unintentionally, documents evidence tampering when it occurs. The audit trail reads, Complaint number IA 2023-0442. Status changed from sustained to expunged. Authorization, Lieutenant R. Fitch. Review committee approval, not found. Not found. The complaint was sustained, meaning an investigation determined that Calloway violated policy, and then expunged without the committee approval required by department regulations. Lieutenant Raymond Fitch, the same watch commander who signed Veronica's booking paperwork without reading it, has been systematically erasing evidence of Calloway's misconduct. 2 more complaints follow the same pattern. Sustained, then expunged. All authorized by Fitch, all lacking proper documentation. A supervisor protecting a subordinate, a pattern of cover-up that transforms individual misconduct into institutional conspiracy. Tate prints the audit trail, adds it to her file, and begins to understand that this investigation is no longer about one traffic stop. This is about a system designed to protect itself and the cracks that are finally beginning to show. In her office at the precinct, Captain Joanna Merrick meets with the department's legal counsel, a conversation that generates no written record because both parties understand that written records can be subpoenaed. Can we settle this quietly? Offer compensation? Get a non-disclosure agreement? The counsel shakes his head. She has not asked for money. She filed a complaint and requested documentation. That is unusual. What does she want then? I do not think she wants anything we can give her. The observation hangs in the air, accurate but unhelpful. Veronica Ashford has not threatened a lawsuit, has not demanded a monetary settlement, has not done any of the things that would allow the department to make this problem disappear through the usual channels of checkbook diplomacy. She wants something else, something that money cannot buy and settlements cannot provide. She wants accountability, and she is patient enough to wait for it. The pieces are falling into place, and the picture they are forming is worse than anyone imagined. But the real revelation is still coming. The moment when the system finally realizes exactly who it tried to silence. Make sure you stay until the end. 3 weeks after the arrest, the investigation reaches a threshold that requires formal action. Detective Tate's findings have been reviewed, verified, and escalated through channels that lead inexorably to a hearing, a proceeding, a moment of institutional reckoning that no amount of damage control can prevent. The body cam footage has been compiled, synchronized across 3 units. 47 minutes of video that documents every word spoken on Interstate 285 that night, every instruction given, every decision made. The footage is devastating not because it shows violence or brutality, but because it shows the casual machinery of assumption, the way officers decided guilt before evidence, the way supervisors enabled rather than supervised. Timestamp 23:52:14. Calloway's voice. Profile fits. Trust me. Voss's response. Document everything. Make it stick. Timestamp 23:53:47. Dispatch confirmation received. Arrest proceeds regardless. The gap between those 2 timestamps, 93 seconds, is the gap between what the officers knew and what they chose to do anyway. 93 seconds during which the legal basis for the stop collapsed and the arrest proceeded regardless. 93 seconds that will define the rest of Marcus Calloway's career. Owen Price sits in an interview room across from Detective Tate, his uniform neat, but his composure fraying. 8 months out of the academy, and his career is about to pivot in a direction he never anticipated. I was new. His voice is quiet, ashamed. I did not know what to do. Your dashcam was running. You saw dispatch confirm the vehicle was clean. Yes. And you said nothing. The silence stretches. Price stares at the table, at his hands, at anywhere except Tate's eyes. When he speaks again, his voice has the quality of confession, the release of something that has been pressing against his conscience for weeks. I should have. I know that now. I watched Sergeant Voss tell him to make it stick, and I knew that was wrong. I watched him arrest her anyway, and I knew that was wrong. And I stood there. I did nothing. I have no excuse. Tate slides a form across the table. I need you to write that down. Official statement. Everything you witnessed. Price picks up the pen, hesitates, then begins to write, each word a step away from the colleagues who will soon despise him, and toward the person he decided to become when he realized that silence is its own kind of complicity. His statement reads in part, I observed Sergeant Voss instruct Officer Calloway to make it stick after dispatch confirmed the vehicle was not stolen. I did not intervene. I observed Officer Calloway proceed with the arrest despite lacking probable cause. I did not intervene. I am providing this statement voluntarily because I cannot in good conscience remain silent about what I witnessed. The statement goes into the file. The file goes to the district attorney, and the machinery of accountability continues its slow, grinding progress toward a courtroom where everything will finally be exposed. Lieutenant Raymond Fitch's records tell their own story, one that Tate assembles through database queries and audit trails, and the kind of detective work that requires patience rather than intuition. Booking logs for the past 2 years. Every case processed during night shifts when Fitch commanded the desk. Average time between report submission and supervisory approval, 4 minutes. Average length of review notes, 0 characters. a pattern of rubber stamp oversight that allowed officers like Calloway to operate without meaningful supervision. The expunged complaints make it worse. 3 formal complaints against Calloway, all sustained through investigation, all subsequently erased from his record. The audit trail shows Fitch's authorization for each expungement, shows the absence of review committee approval, shows a supervisor actively protecting a subordinate from the consequences of documented misconduct. This is not negligence. This is conspiracy. 2 people working together to ensure that bad actions have no consequences, that patterns never emerge from individual incidents, that the system protects itself from the accountability it claims to provide. The case file grows. The hearing date approaches. And somewhere in a federal building downtown, Veronica Ashford waits for the moment when all of this will become public, when the officers who arrested her for impersonating herself will finally understand exactly who they chose to target. The morning of the hearing arrives with the gray overcast that November brings to Atlanta, the sky pressing down like a weight that matches the atmosphere inside Fulton County Courthouse. This is not Veronica's courtroom. She sits in federal court, a different building, a different jurisdiction, but the hearing today concerns a case she knows intimately, a case she has been preparing to preside over for months. State of Georgia versus Marcus Calloway. Excessive force. The victim is a 19-year-old named Jerome Watkins, stopped for a broken taillight 8 months ago and beaten badly enough to require hospitalization. The case has been winding through preliminary motions and discovery disputes, the usual procedural warfare that precedes any trial involving law enforcement defendants. Calloway sits at the defense table, his attorney beside him, his union representative in the gallery behind. He does not yet know that the investigation into his traffic stop of Veronica Ashford has been folded into the broader pattern evidence that the prosecution intends to introduce, does not yet know that his career is about to end in this room, today, in a manner he could not have predicted. The bailiff calls the room to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge Theodore Marsh presiding. Judge Marsh enters through the door behind the bench, 70 years old, silver-haired, the kind of judicial presence that commands respect through gravitas rather than volume. He takes his seat, adjusts his glasses, and addresses the courtroom with the measured formality that proceedings require. Before we begin, the court notes for the record that the original presiding judge in this matter, the Honorable Veronica Ashford, has recused herself pursuant to 28 U.S.C. Section 455, citing a conflict of interest. This court has been assigned to continue proceedings. He reads from a document, the recusal memo that Veronica filed 3 weeks ago. I, Veronica Ashford, United States District Judge, hereby recuse myself from case number 124 CV03892 due to a personal conflict arising from an incident involving the defendant. I have no ability to preside impartially given my direct involvement in events relevant to the pattern evidence being presented. The words take a moment to register. Calloway's face cycles through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror as the name connects to the memory, as the woman he arrested becomes the judge he was scheduled to face, as the magnitude of his mistake becomes clear. His attorney leans over, whispering urgently. Calloway shakes his head, the gesture of denial that comes when reality contradicts everything a person believed to be true. And then the courtroom door opens, and Veronica Ashford walks in. She wears black robes, federal judicial robes, the formal attire of her office, the uniform of authority that she has earned through years of legal practice and judicial service. Her identification badge is visible. United States District Court. She does not look at Calloway, does not need to. Her presence is its own statement, the answer to every dismissive assumption he made that night on Interstate 285. She walks to the witness area and takes her seat. A federal judge, here to testify about the pattern of conduct that links her traffic stop to the case being tried, to provide evidence that transforms one officer's mistake into proof of systematic misconduct. Calloway stares. His mouth opens, closes, opens again. No words come. The woman he handcuffed, arrested, mocked as a fraud with fake credentials, She is sitting 10 feet away in the robes of a federal judge, and there is nothing he can say, nothing he can do, nothing that will undo what he chose to do that night. The prosecutor, Assistant United States Attorney Brian Harwell, rises. Your Honor, the government calls Judge Veronica Ashford as a witness regarding pattern evidence under Federal Rule of Evidence 404B. Defense counsel objects immediately. Relevance, Your Honor. The incident involving Judge Ashford is separate from the Watkins case. Judge Marsh's response is measured, decisive. Overruled. Pattern evidence is admissible to establish motive, intent, plan, and absence of mistake. The government may proceed. Veronica takes the oath, her hand raised, her voice steady, her composure absolute. She has testified in proceedings before, though usually from the bench rather than the witness stand. The reversal is strange but not uncomfortable. She knows how to speak in courtrooms, knows how to present facts in ways that leave no room for misinterpretation. Judge Ashford, can you describe the events of November 4th of this year? She begins. The traffic stop, the dispatch confirmation, the arrest that proceeded anyway. She speaks in chronological order, providing timestamps, quoting phrases she memorized that night because she knew they would matter later. Her testimony is clinical, precise, devastating in its absence of emotion. At 11:47 p.m., I was stopped on Interstate 285 by Officer Marcus Calloway. At 11:53 p.m., dispatch confirmed my vehicle was not stolen, my registration was valid, and my record was clean. The arrest proceeded regardless. I was charged with suspicion of operating a stolen vehicle and false impersonation of a public official, specifically impersonating myself. A murmur ripples through the gallery. Reporters who have been covering this trial shift in their seats, recognizing that the story they came to cover has just transformed into something larger, something that will generate headlines beyond the local section. I spent 7 hours in a holding cell before being released without charges. I filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, which triggered the investigation that produced the evidence being presented today. The prosecutor introduces exhibits. Body cam footage, synchronized across 3 units, plays on screens positioned throughout the courtroom. The gallery watches in silence as Calloway's voice fills the room. Profile fits. Trust me. As Voss responds, document everything. Make it stick. As dispatch confirms the vehicle is clean and the arrest continues anyway. Exhibit 12. The Internal Affairs Statistical Analysis. 47 traffic stops. 31 luxury vehicles. 23 black drivers. 14 arrests. 0 convictions. The numbers appear on screen, stark and damning. Exhibit 14. The audit trail showing 3 sustained complaints against Calloway, all expunged by Lieutenant Fitch without proper authorization. The pattern of cover-up that allowed the pattern of misconduct to continue unchecked. Calloway's defense attorney objects repeatedly. Relevance. Prejudicial impact. Foundation. Each objection is overruled. The evidence has been properly authenticated, properly connected to the case at hand, properly devastating to any claim that Calloway's conduct was an isolated incident or honest mistake. When Veronica finishes her direct testimony, defense counsel approaches for cross-examination. His strategy is apparent immediately. Attack her credibility, suggest that she is biased because she was personally affected, imply that her position gives her undue influence over the investigation. Judge Ashford, you filed your complaint with Internal Affairs the same day you were released, correct? Correct. And the investigation into Officer Calloway accelerated significantly after your complaint was filed. I cannot speak to the pace of the investigation. I was not involved in its conduct. But surely your position as a federal judge gave your complaint more weight than it would have received from an ordinary citizen. Veronica's response is immediate, pointed, delivered with the precision of someone who anticipated this line of attack. My complaint was processed through normal channels. The evidence it generated, body cam footage, dispatch records, statistical analysis, would exist regardless of my profession. I did not ask for special treatment. I asked for documentation. The documentation speaks for itself. The defense attorney tries other angles. Questions whether the traffic stop itself was truly unlawful, given the officer's stated reasons. Questions whether dispatch confirmation is definitive or merely advisory. Questions whether professional instinct developed over 20 years might justify continued investigation even after initial indicators clear. Each question receives an answer rooted in law, in precedent, in the statutes that govern police conduct, and the standards that determine whether that conduct crosses constitutional lines. Dispatch confirmation of valid registration eliminates probable cause for vehicle theft suspicion. Georgia Code Section 16-10-23 defines false imprisonment by law enforcement as arrest without legal authority. Once dispatch confirmed my vehicle was not stolen, continuing the arrest constituted false imprisonment under state law and potential violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242 under federal law. She speaks the statute numbers without notes, without reference to documents, with the easy fluency of someone who has spent her career immersed in the law and who knows these particular statutes with personal precision now. Cross-examination ends. Defense counsel returns to his seat looking diminished, his client looking destroyed. The prosecution moves to introduce additional pattern evidence, testimony from other victims of Callaway's traffic stops who have come forward since the investigation began, a parade of witnesses whose experiences mirror Veronica's in disturbing detail. One by one, they testify. A black accountant stopped for suspicious driving in a BMW that was registered to his corporation. A black nurse stopped for erratic lane changes in a Lexus she had owned for 3 years. A black real estate agent stopped for matching a vehicle description in a Tesla that dispatch confirmed clean before she was handcuffed and her car towed. The same patterns, the same justifications, the same outcomes. Charges dropped or declined, no consequences for the officer, no record of the incidents except in the memories of the people whose nights were disrupted and whose trust in law enforcement was permanently damaged. Judge Marsh listens to each witness with the careful attention the testimony deserves. When the parade concludes, he addresses the courtroom. The evidence presented establishes a pattern of conduct that this court finds deeply troubling. However, the court's role today is limited to the matter at hand, the charges against Officer Callaway in the case of Jerome Watkins. He reviews the charges. Count 1. Excessive force in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Count 2. False arrest. Count 3. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. He finds sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all counts. Additionally, this court is referring the following matters to the appropriate authorities. He reads from a prepared list, each referral a stone dropped into water that will generate ripples for months. Lieutenant Raymond Fitch, referred to the district attorney for potential obstruction of justice and tampering with official records. Sergeant Elena Voss, referred to Internal Affairs for supervisory negligence and failure to intervene. Captain Joanna Merrick, referred to the Police Commission for review of command decisions and potential policy violations. Officer Dwight Scanlon, referred to Internal Affairs for harassment, abuse of authority, and potential witness intimidation. Finally, this court is formally requesting that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division open a pattern or practice investigation into the Fulton County Police Department's traffic enforcement practices. The referrals land like verdicts, each one representing a career disrupted, an assumption challenged, a piece of a system that protected itself now exposed to scrutiny it was designed to avoid. Callaway sits, motionless, at the defense table. His attorney speaks to him in low tones, but the words do not register. Everything he believed about that night, that he was doing his job, that his instincts were sound, that the woman he arrested was nobody important, has been systematically dismantled in a courtroom full of witnesses and reporters and colleagues who will never look at him the same way. Court recesses. The gallery empties. Reporters rush to file stories. And Veronica Ashford walks out of the courtroom in her black robes, the same woman who walked out of a holding cell 6 weeks ago, vindicated not by position but by evidence, not by power but by documentation, not by who she is, but by what she was able to prove. Outside the courthouse, the press conference begins before she reaches the parking garage. Captain Merrick stands at a podium, flanked by department officials managing the unmanageable. The department takes all allegations of misconduct with utmost seriousness. Officer Calloway has been suspended without pay pending the outcome of legal proceedings. A reporter shouts from the back, "Was Judge Ashford targeted because she was a federal judge?" We are investigating all aspects of this incident. What about the pattern Detective Tate documented? 47 stops, 14 arrests, 0 convictions? A comprehensive internal review is underway. We are committed to transparency and accountability. The answers are careful, scripted, designed to acknowledge concern without admitting fault. But the damage is already done. The story has escaped the conference room and entered the public record, where it will be discussed, analyzed, and remembered long after the press conference ends. Veronica does not stop to speak to reporters, does not offer quotes or commentary or the kind of media engagement that would transform her from witness to advocate. She did not want attention, did not seek publicity, did not do any of this for the cameras or the headlines or the satisfaction of public vindication. She wanted accountability, and accountability, however partial, is finally beginning to arrive. The drive home takes her past Interstate 285, past the mile marker where her car was stopped, past the shoulder where she stood with her hands on the roof of a Mercedes that belonged to her and her alone. She does not slow down, does not look at the spot, does not need to revisit the memory when the memory has been transmuted into evidence, into testimony, into the beginning of changes that will take years to fully manifest. Some battles are won quickly, with decisive action and immediate results. Others are won slowly, through documentation and persistence, and the patient accumulation of proof that cannot be denied. Veronica has fought both kinds of battles in her career. She knows that the second kind matters more. The sun sets over Atlanta, painting the sky in colors that suggest endings and beginnings in equal measure. Somewhere in the city, Marcus Calloway contemplates the destruction of everything he built over 20 years. Somewhere, Elena Voss realizes that her career of looking away has finally caught up with her. Somewhere, Raymond Fitch drafts a resignation letter that will save his pension but not his reputation. And somewhere, a federal judge drives home in a silver Mercedes, its door still bearing the scratches from handcuffs that should never have been applied, wondering whether the system that failed her will learn anything from its failure, or simply find new ways to fail the next person. The question remains unanswered. The story continues. 6 weeks pass. The rhythm of consequence unfolds with the institutional slowness that defines accountability in systems designed to resist it. Headlines fade from front pages to archives. Public attention shifts to newer outrages, fresher scandals, the endless cycle of news that replaces yesterday's injustice with today's. But in offices throughout Fulton County, in federal buildings and precinct break rooms, and the quiet spaces where careers end and begin, the machinery of aftermath continues its grinding work. Marcus Calloway receives his official suspension notice on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered by an internal affairs officer who does not meet his eyes. The document is 3 pages long, single-spaced, citing violations of department policy, pending criminal charges, and the recommendation of the Disciplinary Review Board. Suspended without pay, effective immediately. Badge and service weapon to be surrendered within 24 hours. Access to department facilities revoked. Contact with witnesses prohibited pending trial. He reads it twice, as if repetition might change the words, might reveal some loophole or exception that his attorney can exploit. There is none. The language is precise, drafted by lawyers who understand that precision protects against appeal, and the conclusion is unavoidable. His trial date is set for 8 to 12 months in the future, the standard timeline for federal civil rights prosecutions where discovery is extensive and procedural motions consume months. Until then, he exists in a limbo of his own creation, not convicted, but not exonerated, not imprisoned, but not free. His colleagues avoid him when they pass on the street. His neighbors have started asking questions he cannot answer. His wife has begun sleeping in the guest room, and he cannot blame her for it. The irony is not lost on him. He spent 14 years putting people in situations like this, arresting them, processing them, sending them into a system that presumed guilt regardless of what the law said about innocence. Now he sits on the other side of that system, and the experience is nothing like what he imagined. Sergeant Elena Voss receives her disciplinary notice on the same day, though her consequences are less severe. 30-day suspension without pay, mandatory bias training, 40 hours minimum. Transfer to administrative duties upon return. 18-month probationary status, during which any additional complaint will result in termination. She accepts the notice without argument, signs where indicated, and walks out of the captain's office with the measured stride of someone who has been expecting this moment since the night she told Calloway to make it stick. She knew, even then, that the words were wrong. Knew that the arrest was unjustified. Knew that the system they were exploiting would eventually turn on them, because systems always do when the exploitation becomes visible enough. What she did not know, could not have known, was that the woman in the Mercedes was a federal judge. That detail transforms her mistake from a career setback into a career-ending catastrophe. The transfer to administrative duties is permanent. The supervisory authority she spent 22 years building will never be restored. She will finish her remaining years in uniform behind a desk, processing paperwork for officers who whisper about her when she passes. Some lessons arrive too late to matter. Lieutenant Raymond Fitch receives a different kind of notice. Not disciplinary, but advisory. A meeting with the deputy chief and department legal counsel, during which the options are explained with the clinical precision of people who have had this conversation before. Option 1. Resign immediately, forfeiting supervisory pension enhancements, but retaining base retirement benefits. Quiet departure. No public statement. No admission of wrongdoing. Option 2. Face termination proceedings, during which the evidence of expunged complaints, falsified records, and supervisory negligence will be presented to a review board. Public hearing, media coverage, permanent record of the findings. The choice is not really a choice. Fitch signs the resignation letter that afternoon, effective immediately. His supervisory pension enhancement, $800 monthly, disappears with his signature. Over 30 years of retirement, that amounts to nearly $300,000. An expensive choice, as the deputy chief notes with carefully neutral expression. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is public exposure, criminal referral, the destruction of a reputation he spent decades building. He chooses financial loss over professional annihilation and walks out of the building for the last time carrying a cardboard box of personal effects and the knowledge that he got off easier than he deserved. Captain Joanna Merrick remains in her position, technically, but the police commission review that Judge Marsh requested has begun its slow process of evaluation. She attends meetings, answers questions, provides documentation that her attorneys have carefully reviewed. The outcome is uncertain. Commission reviews can result in anything from exoneration to termination, but the uncertainty itself is a kind of punishment, the constant awareness that her career now depends on the judgment of people who have seen what her command allowed. She has stopped sleeping well, has started delegating more responsibilities to subordinates, has begun, in quiet moments, to consider whether early retirement might be preferable to the endless scrutiny that her position now requires. The system is protecting itself, as it always does. But for the first time in her tenure, that protection feels insufficient. If you have been following this story from the beginning, you already know that justice rarely arrives complete. But sometimes, partial justice is enough to change the direction of everything that follows. Stay with us. The final revelations are still coming. The Department of Justice responds to Judge Marsh's referral with the measured language of an institution that receives such requests regularly and acts on them selectively. A letter arrives at the Fulton County Police Department headquarters, addressed to the chief, copied to the mayor's office, and the county commission. The letter reads, in relevant part, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has opened a preliminary inquiry into traffic enforcement practices at the Fulton County Police Department. A determination regarding a full pattern or practice investigation under 42 U.S.C. Section 14141 will be made within 90 days. During this preliminary period, the department requests cooperation with federal investigators and preservation of all records related to traffic enforcement activities for the past 5 years. Preliminary inquiry, not a full investigation. The distinction matters in ways that only lawyers and bureaucrats fully appreciate. A preliminary inquiry is exploratory, limited in scope, designed to determine whether the evidence justifies the resources required for comprehensive investigation. Many preliminary inquiries end without further action. The request for record preservation is standard, almost routine, but the request itself is significant. Federal attention, once attracted, rarely disappears quietly. The 90-day window creates uncertainty that affects every decision the department makes. Hiring freezes, policy reviews, training programs hastily implemented to demonstrate commitment to improvement, the appearance of accountability, if not its substance. Detective Carol Tate receives recognition for her investigation, a commendation letter that will appear in her personnel file and advance her next promotion review. The recognition is deserved, but it carries complications. Her colleagues in patrol view her with the wariness that internal affairs officers always generate. Her findings exposed failures that many would have preferred remain hidden. The commendation marks her as someone who follows evidence regardless of where it leads, and not everyone considers that a compliment. She continues her work regardless. The investigation she began has spawned others. Reviews of additional officers whose patterns resemble Callaway's, audits of supervisory oversight across multiple precincts, policy recommendations that may or may not be implemented depending on political will and budget constraints. The system is vast, and her findings represent only a small portion of what comprehensive reform would require. But small portions accumulate, and she has learned that patience, combined with documentation, eventually produces results. Owen Price sits in an interview room across from Detective Tate, 3 months after his written statement helped build the case against his former colleagues. The room is the same one where he confessed to standing by while injustice occurred. The dynamics now are different. Internal affairs. Tate's voice is neutral, professional. Most officers avoid this division. We are not popular. Price nods. He knows this, has experienced it directly in the months since his testimony became public. Colleagues who once invited him for drinks after shift now walk past without acknowledgement. His locker has been vandalized twice. Nothing dramatic, just small acts of petty retaliation designed to communicate disapproval. The silent treatment that whistleblowers always receive, regardless of whether their whistleblowing was justified. Why? Tate asks. You are 8 months out of academy. Your career is just starting. IA will follow you for the rest of it. He considers the question, has been considering it since he submitted his application, since he decided that the path forward required walking toward the thing that frightened him rather than away from it. Because someone has to do it. The words come out simpler than he expected, less eloquent than he rehearsed. And because I know what it costs to look away. I did it once. I will not do it again. Tate studies him for a long moment. She has interviewed many officers over the years, some who wanted IA as a stepping stone to promotion, others who wanted it as a refuge from street duty, still others who wanted it for reasons they could not articulate even to themselves. Price is different. His motivation is specific, personal, rooted in a memory that will define the rest of his career one way or another. 6-month probation, she says finally. You will handle your own cases. You will face hostility from colleagues who believe you betrayed them. You will question whether this was the right choice on days when the questioning is loudest. And you will keep doing the job anyway, because that is what the job requires. Price nods again. He understood these terms before he applied. Understanding them and experiencing them are different things, but he is prepared. As prepared as anyone can be for a path that leads away from acceptance and toward isolation. Do not make me regret this, Tate adds, though her tone suggests that she already believes she will not. He begins training the following week. Case files, interview techniques, evidence analysis. The unglamorous work of investigating people who wear the same uniform he wears, who swore the same oath he swore, who believe they are justified in ways he once believed himself. The work is harder than patrol, in different ways. The enemies are harder to identify. The victories are harder to claim. The consequences are harder to measure. But his father's voice stays with him, the advice given years ago by a man who understood what law enforcement could be when it chose to be. Be the officer people need, not the one they fear. He tries, every day, one case at a time. The scratches remain on Veronica Ashford's Mercedes. The dealership offered to repair them during her regular service appointment, buffing out the marks where metal met metal on the night of November 4th, restoring the door panel to factory-perfect condition. She declined, asked them to leave the scratches exactly as they were. The service advisor looked confused. Customers typically want damage repaired, imperfections eliminated, evidence of past incidents erased. Her request was unusual enough that he asked twice whether she was certain. She was certain. The scratches serve a purpose now, one that has nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with memory. They remind her, every time she approaches the vehicle, of what happened and what it revealed. The system she devoted her career to serving failed her that night, and the failure exposed failures that extended far beyond her individual experience. The scratches are evidence of that failure, and evidence should be preserved. She runs her fingers over them sometimes, feeling the ridges and grooves where handcuffs scraped paint away. The texture is rough, imperfect, a physical record of a moment that documentation alone cannot fully capture. Documents describe what happened. The scratches remember how it felt. 2 months after the hearing, she returns to her normal caseload. The Watkins trial proceeds without her. Judge Marsh handles it competently, impartially, with the attention to procedure that federal cases require. She follows the proceedings through official channels, receiving transcripts and rulings like any other interested party. The distance is appropriate, necessary, required by the same ethical standards that prompted her recusal. But she watches and waits and wonders whether any of it will matter. The afternoon light slants through her office windows, casting long shadows across case files that have nothing to do with Marcus Calloway or traffic enforcement or the patterns of misconduct that her complaint helped expose. She reviews briefs, drafts rulings, does the work of a federal judge, the work she has done for years, the work that will continue regardless of what happens in other courtrooms. Her assistant knocks. A visitor is waiting. Detective Carol Tate, requesting a few minutes if the judge has time. Veronica considers declining. The investigation is complete, the referrals made, the consequences unfolding through appropriate channels. There is nothing more she needs to provide, nothing more she should provide, given the ethical boundaries that separate judges from ongoing investigations. But curiosity wins. She asks her assistant to show the detective in. Tate enters with the slightly uncertain bearing of someone who is not accustomed to federal judicial chambers. The room is impressive. Wood paneling, legal volumes arranged by subject, the trappings of authority that accumulate around positions of power. She has been in courtrooms before, but this is different. This is where the decisions get made before the courtroom even convenes. Detective, I was not expecting a visit. I know. Tate remains standing until Veronica gestures toward a chair. I wanted to update you on a few things. Off the record, if that is acceptable. Off the record. Veronica's expression remains neutral. Meaning what you tell me will not be documented, and I will not be asked to testify about it. Correct. Then proceed. Tate opens a folder she has been carrying, though she does not reference its contents directly. The DOJ inquiry has expanded. What started as preliminary is now moving toward full pattern or practice investigation. The statistical analysis we compiled was more extensive than they usually see from local departments. Veronica nods. She expected this, or something like it. The numbers were too clear, the patterns too obvious, the evidence too well documented to dismiss. Federal investigators follow evidence the way she follows evidence, and the evidence here points toward systemic failure rather than individual misconduct. Lieutenant Fitch resigned. You probably know that already. I heard. What you might not know is that we found additional irregularities in his record-keeping, complaints that were reassigned before investigation, reports that were modified after submission, a pattern of interference that extended beyond Calloway's cases. This is new information. Veronica leans forward slightly, her expression sharpening. How extensive? We are still determining that, but the IT audit trail shows modifications going back at least 4 years. Multiple officers affected, multiple supervisors involved at various levels. Tate pauses, choosing her next words carefully. The picture is larger than we initially understood. And Fitch? Is he cooperating with the expanded investigation? He resigned. He has no obligation to cooperate, and his attorney has advised him to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights if called to testify. The Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination that protects guilty and innocent alike, that Veronica has upheld in countless rulings because the Constitution requires it regardless of whether individual outcomes feel just. Fitch will not testify against himself, will not explain who else was involved, will not illuminate the broader network of complicity that his actions suggest. The truth will emerge eventually, through other evidence, other witnesses, other avenues of investigation. But it will emerge slowly, incompletely, in pieces that may never form a complete picture. There is something else. Tate's voice drops, though they are alone in the office with the door closed. Something that does not fit into the official file. Veronica waits. The dashcam footage from Officer Price's vehicle, 47 minutes total. But the transport time from the traffic stop to the precinct was 52 minutes according to GPS records. There is a 4-minute and 54-second gap that we cannot account for. Equipment malfunction? The footage is continuous. No interruptions, no technical failures. The timestamp simply jumps from one moment to another without transition. Which means the footage was edited. Which means someone with access to the evidence server modified the original file before it was entered into the official record. Tate's expression is grim. The modification happened within 6 hours of the arrest, before I pulled the footage for review, before anyone knew this case would become what it became. Veronica processes this information with the analytical precision her position requires. Edited footage implies planning, implies that someone anticipated the need to remove those 4 minutes and 54 seconds before anyone asked questions about them. Implies a level of coordination that goes beyond Calloway's individual misconduct, or Voss's supervisory negligence, or even Fitch's record tampering. What happened in those 4 minutes? I do not know. The gap exists between the traffic stop and the arrival at the precinct. Whatever occurred, it happened on the highway, or somewhere between there and booking. Tate closes her folder. I have flagged it for the federal investigators. They have resources we do not, forensic specialists who might be able to recover the deleted segment, but I wanted you to know, in case it matters. It matters. Veronica does not say this aloud, but her expression communicates it clearly. 4 minutes of missing footage means 4 minutes of hidden evidence. Hidden evidence means hidden truth, and hidden truth, in cases like this, usually hides something worse than what has already been exposed. Thank you for telling me. You filed the complaint that started this. You deserve to know where it leads, even when it leads somewhere we cannot yet follow. Tate rises to leave. At the door, she pauses. For what it is worth, Judge, your complaint changed things. Not everything. Not enough. But things that would not have changed without it. The DOJ inquiry, the statistical analysis, the policy reviews that are happening across multiple precincts now. None of that would exist if you had decided to let it go. Veronica considers this. She could have let it go, could have accepted her release, filed no complaint, returned to her life and her work, and forgotten about one night on Interstate 285. Most people would have. Most people do. The system counts on their exhaustion, their resignation, their rational calculation that fighting produces costs that exceed benefits. She did not let it go, and the decision matters, even if its full consequences remain uncertain. The system does not change willingly, she says finally. It changes when the cost of staying the same exceeds the cost of changing. Documentation creates those costs. Evidence creates those costs. Complaints that cannot be dismissed or buried or explained away, those create the costs that eventually force change. Eventually. Tate's tone acknowledges the qualifier. Not quickly, not completely, but eventually. Eventually is sometimes enough. The detective leaves. Veronica sits alone in her office as the afternoon light continues its slow migration across the walls, thinking about 4 minutes and 54 seconds that someone wanted hidden badly enough to risk everything that has since occurred. The missing footage, the edited timestamp, the gap that cannot be explained. These are the threads that remain unwoven when this story ends, because some stories do not end cleanly. Some stories continue in investigations and inquiries and the slow grinding work of accountability that extends beyond any single narrative. Make sure you are subscribed, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The chief of police sits across from Veronica Ashford's desk 2 weeks after Detective Tate's visit. His deputy chief accompanies him, both men wearing expressions of careful neutrality that mask whatever they actually feel about being summoned to a federal judge's chambers. Summoned is perhaps too strong a word. Invited, requested. The language was carefully chosen to preserve the fiction of voluntary cooperation while communicating that declining was not truly an option. Judge Ashford, on behalf of the department, I want to personally apologize for what occurred. Veronica cuts him off before he can continue. Chief, apologies mean nothing without systemic change. I did not ask you here for an apology. I asked you here for commitments. She slides a typed document across the desk. 3 pages, single-spaced, outlining specific reforms that the department will implement as a condition of her not pursuing additional legal remedies. She has standing to sue, has evidence to support a substantial civil judgment, has the kind of case that settlement attorneys dream about, with documented misconduct, pattern evidence, and a sympathetic plaintiff whose position gives her unimpeachable credibility. She is not interested in money. She is interested in change. The chief reads the document. His deputy reads over his shoulder. Neither speaks for a long moment. Mandatory bias training for the entire department, Veronica summarizes. Not remedial, preventive. Everyone. No exceptions. The chief nods slowly. This is achievable. Expensive, but achievable. Revised traffic enforcement protocols. Independent review of all stops resulting in arrest, where dispatch confirms no underlying violation. Another nod. More expensive. More labor-intensive, but achievable. Body camera policy overhaul. Cameras must remain on during all citizen interactions. Malfunctions investigated by third-party auditor, not internal staff. The chief's expression tightens. Third-party oversight means surrendering control, means admitting that internal review cannot be trusted, means acknowledging the very failures that brought them to this office in the first place. Independent Internal Affairs Oversight Board. 3 civilian members, 2 from community advocacy organizations. Voting power equal to police representatives. The deputy chief shifts in his seat. Civilian oversight is the reform that law enforcement resists most fiercely, the acknowledgement that the profession cannot police itself, that outside eyes are required to maintain accountability. Unions will fight this. Officers will resent it. The political cost will be substantial. Quarterly traffic stop data published publicly. Demographic breakdowns. Searchable database. Complete transparency. This last requirement is perhaps the most significant. Transparency prevents the patterns that thrived in darkness. Public data allows community members, journalists, and advocacy organizations to identify disparities before they become entrenched. It transforms accountability from reactive to proactive, from occasional to constant. Judge, the chief says finally, some of these require city council approval, budget allocation, union negotiation. I cannot simply implement them by fiat. Then get approval, get budget, negotiate with the union, or I refer this entire matter to the Department of Justice for consent decree proceedings. Your choice. A consent decree would mean federal oversight for years, would mean every policy decision reviewed by outside monitors, would mean the department losing autonomy over its own operations in ways that make the reforms she is proposing look minor by comparison. The threat is real. The evidence to support it exists. And the chief must know by now, that Veronica Ashford does not make threats she is unwilling to execute. I will need 6 months to implement. You have 4. Written progress reports monthly, delivered to my chambers. I will be monitoring personally. The chief pauses, calculating. His deputy whispers something. The calculation completes. Agreed. He signs the acknowledgement she prepared. A document that does not constitute a legal settlement, does not admit wrongdoing, does not create enforceable obligations in the traditional sense. But it creates something perhaps more powerful, a record, a commitment made in the presence of a federal judge who will remember whether it is honored and who has the authority to act if it is not. They leave. Veronica allows herself a small smile, the first genuine expression of satisfaction she has permitted since this began. The reforms will not fix everything, will not eliminate bias or misconduct or the systemic failures that enabled both. But they will make some things harder, will create friction where there was none, will force the department to confront truths it would prefer to ignore. Some battles are won through dramatic courtroom confrontations. Others are won through documents signed in quiet offices, witnessed by no one, binding no one legally, but establishing expectations that become harder to abandon once they are formally acknowledged. The courthouse hallway stretches long and quiet as Veronica walks toward the parking garage. Her heels click against marble floors that have heard a century of footsteps, lawyers and judges and defendants and victims and everyone else whose lives intersect with the legal system's imperfect machinery. The light through tall windows carries the amber quality of late afternoon, the hour when courthouse is empty and the day's work yields to the night's reflection. A young man approaches from a bench near the elevators. He has been waiting, clearly, with the nervous energy of someone who is not sure whether his presence will be welcome. She recognizes him as she draws closer. Jerome Watkins, 19 years old, the victim in the excessive force case that began all of this. Judge Ashford? She stops, studies him. He looks different from the photographs in the case file. Older somehow, though only months have passed. Or perhaps not older. Perhaps just less afraid. I wanted to thank you. He holds a document in his hands, something official-looking, though she cannot read it from this distance. For the case, for him, and for this. He extends the document. She takes it, reading the header with a recognition that shifts her expression from judicial neutrality to genuine warmth. Order of expungement. Jerome Watkins. The arrest that brought him into the system, the stop that resulted in his beating, the charges that were later dropped, the record that would have followed him despite his innocence, has been erased. Her signature appears at the bottom, dated 3 weeks ago, one of dozens of expungement orders she signs monthly without remembering the individual names attached. She remembers this one now. You did nothing wrong, Jerome. The record should reflect that. I know. He takes the document back, holding it like something precious. I just wanted to say thank you in person, and to tell you what I am doing with it. He pauses, gathering words that seem too large for the hallway's quiet confines. Community college, criminal justice major. I want to be a lawyer, maybe a prosecutor. A slight smile crosses his face. I want to be on the side that makes sure this does not happen to other people. Veronica feels something shift in her chest. Not quite emotion, not quite pride, but something adjacent to both. This is why she does the work. Not for the convictions, or the acquittals, or the procedural victories that fill her days. For the people like Jerome, who survive the system's failures and decide to fix them rather than flee them. Good. We need people who understand both sides. She reaches into her briefcase, withdrawing a business card that she keeps for moments exactly like this one. Keep this. Call me when you need a recommendation letter. For law school applications, clerkship interviews, whatever comes next. Jerome takes the card with the careful reverence of someone receiving something valuable. He will call, she suspects, years from now, when the path he has chosen requires endorsements from people with authority. And she will remember this moment, this hallway, this young man who stood where the system tried to crush him and decided to make the system better instead. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Jerome, for not giving up. He leaves. She watches him go, his stride carrying a confidence that did not exist in the photographs from 8 months ago. The arc of a life bending toward something better than what the system tried to impose. This is why she does it. All of it. The paperwork, and the hearings, and the negotiations, and the threats that are not quite threats. For the Jerome Watkinses. For the people who get second chances. For the ones who survive and decide to fight. The parking garage is quiet at this hour, her footsteps echoing against concrete walls that amplify every sound. Her Mercedes sits in its reserved spot, silver paint catching the fluorescent lights, door panel bearing the scratches she has chosen to preserve. She approaches slowly, keys in hand, thoughts still occupied by the day's events. The chief's reluctant agreement, Jerome's grateful words, the 4-minute gap that remains unexplained. These pieces do not fit together neatly. The story she has lived through does not have a clean ending, a moment where all threads resolve and all questions answer themselves. Real stories rarely do. Her phone buzzes. A text message from an unknown number, the digits unfamiliar, no name attached. The message reads, "You made powerful enemies. Watch your back." She stares at the screen for a long moment. The words could mean anything. Could be a crank, a troll, someone who read about the case and decided to inject themselves into a narrative they have no part in. Could be someone with actual information, actual connection to the events she has exposed. Could be a warning. Could be a threat. She does not respond, does not engage, deletes the message with a single swipe, the digital record erased as thoroughly as the complaints that Fitch buried in Calloway's file. But she does not forget. The scratches are rough under her fingertips as she unlocks the door, the texture a physical reminder of everything that has happened and everything that remains unresolved. She slides into the driver's seat, starts the engine, lets the familiar hum settle her thoughts into something approaching calm. Her phone buzzes again. Different number this time. She considers ignoring it, but something, instinct perhaps, or the accumulated wariness of 6 weeks spent fighting a system that fights back, prompts her to answer. Judge Ashford. A male voice, unfamiliar, with the flat quality of someone speaking carefully. We should talk. Who is this? Someone who knows things about Lieutenant Fitch, about who he was protecting, about what happened in those 4 minutes that disappeared from Officer Price's dashcam. The words land like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward in implications she cannot yet trace. She should hang up, should refuse to engage with anonymous callers making dramatic claims, should recognize this as the kind of manipulation that powerful people use to distract investigators from legitimate evidence. But the 4 minutes haunt her. The gap that cannot be explained, the footage that someone edited before anyone knew to ask questions. I am listening. Not on the phone. We meet. Somewhere public. Somewhere you choose. I will explain what I know, and you can decide what to do with it. Why contact me? Why not go to Internal Affairs or the federal investigators? A pause. When the voice returns, it carries something that might be fear, might be calculation, might be both. Because I do not trust them. Because what I know goes higher than Fitch. Because you are the only person in this situation who has proven that documentation matters more than politics. Another pause. And because I watched what you did with one traffic stop. Imagine what you could do with what I have. The call ends. No name, no location, No follow-up instructions, just an offer, suspended in digital space, waiting for her to decide whether to pursue it. Veronica sits in her Mercedes, engine running, garage lights humming overhead, phone dark in her hand. The choice before her is not simple. Anonymous sources can provide genuine information or fabricated misdirection. They can illuminate truth or obscure it. They can be whistleblowers with conscience or agents provocateurs with agendas. She does not know which this caller represents, cannot know from a 30-second phone conversation and a promise of revelations. The only way to find out is to follow the thread, to meet, to listen, to evaluate whatever evidence is offered with the same rigor she applies to everything else. The risk is real. The caller mentioned powerful enemies, mentioned something going higher than Fitch. These are not reassuring words from someone who refuses to identify themselves. But the 4 minutes remain missing. The questions remain unanswered. And Veronica Ashford has never been someone who accepts incomplete narratives when complete ones are possible. She will think about it. Will decide in the morning when the day's events have settled and her judgment is not compromised by exhaustion. Will consider the options, weigh the risks, make a decision based on evidence rather than impulse. For now, she drives. The garage exit releases her into Atlanta's evening traffic, the flow of taillights and headlights that defines cities at dusk. She merges onto the highway, different from Interstate 285, deliberately chosen, a route that does not take her past mile marker 22, and lets the motion carry her thoughts toward home. In her rearview mirror, the city recedes, the courthouse where she has spent her career, the precinct where she spent one night, the federal building where she delivered a complaint that changed trajectories she will never fully trace. Ahead, the road continues. The story continues. The consequences of one night on Interstate 285 ripple outward in directions she cannot predict, affecting people she will never meet, shaping outcomes she will never witness. Some cases close. Verdicts are rendered. Sentences are served. Parties go their separate ways, carrying whatever the legal system allocated to them. Others just begin. The verdict opens doors rather than closing them. The evidence generates questions rather than answering them. The ending is not an ending, but a transition, a pause before the next phase of a narrative that extends beyond any individual's capacity to contain it. This case, her case, though she never wanted it to be hers, belongs to the second category. The trial of Marcus Calloway will proceed through its lengthy federal timeline. The DOJ investigation will run its 90-day clock and likely extend beyond. The reforms she extracted from the chief will be implemented or not implemented, monitored, and measured over months and years. The 4 missing minutes will be recovered or remain lost, depending on forensic capabilities she cannot predict. And somewhere, someone knows something that connects these pieces in ways she has not yet imagined. Someone who watched what she did with one traffic stop and believes she could do more with whatever evidence they possess. The phone sits silent on the passenger seat. The offer hangs unanswered. She drives home through streets that look different now than they did before November 4th. Not physically different. The buildings are the same, the traffic patterns unchanged, the familiar landmarks occupying their familiar positions. But different in the way that familiar spaces become different when you understand them more fully. When you have seen what operates beneath their surface. When you know that the system you trusted has mechanisms you never suspected. Her house welcomes her with the quiet warmth of a space that belongs to her alone. She enters, sets her briefcase by the door, pours a glass of wine that she will drink slowly while reviewing the day's events. The ritual of decompression that every judge learns, the separation between professional identity and private self that the role requires. The wine is good. The silence is better. The questions remain, but they no longer demand immediate answers. Tomorrow she will return to her chambers, will preside over cases that have nothing to do with traffic stops or civil rights violations or the patterns of misconduct that her complaint exposed. Will do the work of a federal judge, the work she trained for, the work that defines her professional existence. And she will decide whether to follow the thread that the anonymous caller offered, whether to pursue evidence that might illuminate or complicate, whether to extend her involvement in a case that has already consumed more than she anticipated when she filed that first complaint. The decision can wait. The wine cannot. She drinks. She thinks. She remembers. Outside her window, the Atlanta skyline glitters with lights that represent millions of lives she will never know, millions of stories she will never hear, millions of encounters between authority and citizen that will unfold tonight and tomorrow and every night thereafter. Some of those encounters will be just. Some will not be. Some will generate complaints and investigations and reforms. Most will disappear into the vast, unrecorded space where injustice thrives because no one documents it. She documented hers. That is the difference. That is what she contributed to the slow, grinding work of accountability that systems resist and justice requires. The scratches remain on her car. Evidence of something that happened. The wine glass empties. The night deepens. And somewhere in the city, someone waits for her answer to a question she has not yet decided to ask.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.